Well, already on MTTV is the requisition meeting from Douglas West that was held recently. We've now got a chance to talk to all the candidates on a one-to-one basis with Ms. Quintin Gill, first of all. And I really want to treat this, and you're probably going to have this the easiest of all, on looking back on the big decisions that the government's made over the last few years. And you've been out now a little bit, but how you would have reacted in the real world if you had been in there. I think that's what people want to see how it's going these days. So should we start with Sefton? Because, I mean, there's a big one. Tell me how you would have handled that.
I think the lesson to learn from the Sefton episode is the fact that government is very, very poor, dangerously poor for its own purposes at conveying its message. It doesn't treat the public with respect. It doesn't treat them with candour. And that is really the underlying cause of the public disquiet about the Sefton bailout. Whether it's a good deal or not, I'm not qualified to say because we haven't been given sufficient information. But the government is making its own problems by not explaining itself properly in a timely manner. Yeah,
but what I want to do is, like, say, imagine you had that briefing from the Chief Minister on that day and then you went in to have the vote on it. You know, with that sort of information, I mean, it's great with hindsight, of course, we will all know eventually what's happening. But how would you have voted?
Well, it didn't come to a vote because for different reasons they didn't put it to Tynwald.
Would you support it then?
If I had been a member of the Council of Ministers, I would have wanted to be absolutely satisfied that not only was the deal appropriate, but the deal could be conveyed in a manner which would convince and reassure the public that it was in the national interest.
OK, well, let's say there was a vote. Well, how would you have voted?
I'm not prevaricating. I'm simply saying it's important to understand that the key issue is you have to understand what the deal is about. If I was convinced that bailing out the Sefton was good for the Isle of Man economy, I would of course vote for it. If I wasn't convinced it was good for the economy, if I thought it was a dodgy deal between old mates, then I wouldn't do.
But I do want a yes or no, actually, because I want to know in the real world. And I think the electorate want to know, if you were sitting there and they came to you afterwards, how would you have felt? I mean, would you have said yes or no? I mean, was on the information that's already out there now, and there's probably more information than at the time. For instance, if Eddie Teard comes to you and say, we need you, there may be a vote on this, how are you going to vote? What would you said?
On the basis of what you just described, I would be inclined to vote for the deal, because it's good for the economy, it's good to maintain jobs, but with serious caveats that you've set a very dangerous precedent for every other business in the hospitality sector. They can all go to the government now and say, we have a cash flow problem, we need more assistance, and it's above and beyond what your normal schemes are, because we're a different case. And if they're significant employers, they have a valid case now. So I think I would vote for it if it was good for the economy. And I know you're going to push me for a yes/no answer, so I'll give you that in a moment. But my second point is you have to convey this so people understand the reality of the consideration and the reasoning behind the vote. And if all of those things led me to say it's good for the economy, it's good for the Isle of Man, sustainability, yes, I would vote for it.
And I presume you'd be aspiring to be a minister. I mean, you've got a few years under your belt already, 10 years, haven't you, of being inside there. So, I mean, you'd be on the fast track possibly to become a minister if you got in this time, ready for the next government, whoever runs that. So how would you do inside the Comyn meeting?
Well, I'm not aspiring to be a minister. I think there are two types of politicians, those who seek power and those who seek to hold the powerful to account. And I very much see myself in the latter. If, however, I was offered a ministerial role, and if I thought it was a ministry that I would be able to bring something positive towards it, and it was in the national interest, then of course I would consider it. As a member of Comyn, I would expect to have a vote, I would expect to be treated with respect, and I would not be ridden roughshod by any of my colleagues, be they the so-called more senior members or indeed the Chief Minister.
What do you say to people, though, that you've moved constituency just because you want to grab a seat back in power?
Well, that's illogical.
Well, you lost at the election. This is the only by-election that's come up, and now you're standing here.
I moved to Douglas last year. Jeff Corkish was elected to the council, to Legislative Council this year. There's a by-election because of his elevation to Legislative Council. How can that be planning ahead for a by-election which nobody knew was going to take place? That's illogical.
So you would have jumped if it had been in Ramsey or anywhere else? You wouldn't have gone for any by-election?
I live in Douglas. I moved to Douglas last year. Okay. Douglas is my community. The by-election came up. I have the experience. I'm the best candidate to serve the people of Douglas West for the next 3.5 years. So I'm standing in this by-election.
Okay. Scope of government, are you on board with the reductions and the way they're doing it?
There are no reductions in the way they're doing it, as you describe it. There is an Agenda for Change programme. At the moment, it's rhetoric. It talks about less bureaucracy, for example. It doesn't say how they're going to achieve that, to what level, by what times, within what time scale. So there is no programme. There's an outline programme, and government needs to be held to account to actually implement that. And in fairness to government, one of the key points in that Agenda for Change programme is very much about protecting the vulnerable. And that's the key consideration that the government has totally to be commended for. So yes, the scope of government has to be reviewed. It should have been reviewed when we had the last nonsensical restructure of government, which was purely a cynical opportunism effort to buy time in the run-up to the last general election. That did nobody any good. It's been divisive and expensive. But now we have to have no more restructures, but we have to do the second part, which is the scope and structure of government.
Just a quick yes or no if you can. Shepperton, were you for that?
It's a marginal investment. I don't see the business case. Just today, I understand that the Pinewood Studios have been refused planning permission to expand despite very high level support. It looks like a vanity project.
Can I give you a yes or no on this one? Would you vote for it or against it?
Convince me and I'll say yes, but I'm not convinced, so no.
So you'd gone no. And tuition fees?
Tuition fees, my instinct has always been that there should have been a halfway house, and students should pay towards their tuition fees, or their families probably more likely. I'm the father of girls who've gone to university. I do understand that that's an additional burden, but I think you value it more that way. And I think there has been a tendency for too many students to be sent to university by their schools, even when it's not the most appropriate.
But when it came to that vote, would you have gone yes or no?
It shouldn't have come to that vote.
Well, it did come to the vote, and would you have gone yes or no?
I've gone no, because there's a halfway house that would have been achievable.